December 16, 1944. The Ardennes Forest. While most American soldiers huddled in their frozen foxholes, trying desperately to see through the pitch-black winter night, one sniper was watching everything. Not with technology, not with expensive equipment issued by the Pentagon, but with a trick so simple, so effective, that when his commanding officers found out about it, they wanted to court-martial him. His name has been lost to history, but his method hasn't. And by the time the Battle of the Bulge ended, German soldiers had a name for the sections of forest where he operated. They called them Totenzonen, death zones. This is the story of how one American sniper turned a basic principle of human biology into the most feared psychological weapon in the Ardennes, and how the U.S. military tried to stop him from using it. To understand what this sniper accomplished, you need to understand just how blind the American forces were during those first days of the German offensive. December 1944 in the Ardennes wasn't just cold. It was the kind of cold that makes your rifle bolt stick. The kind that freezes your canteen solid in less than an hour. But worse than the cold was the darkness. At that latitude, in the dead of winter, you had maybe 7 hours of usable daylight. The rest? 17 hours of near-total blackness. And the forest made it worse. Dense pine trees, some standing over 100 feet tall, blocked out what little moonlight there was. Thick fog rolled through the valleys every night, reducing visibility to less than 5 feet. For snipers, this was a nightmare. The M1903A4 Springfield rifle, standard issue for American sharpshooters, came with a Weaver 330C scope. 2.5 power magnification, designed for precision shooting at ranges up to 800 yards. But in the Ardennes at night, you couldn't see 800 inches, let alone 800 yards. The Germans knew this, and they exploited it ruthlessly. Their infiltration tactics were simple, but devastatingly effective. Wait until full darkness. Send out small patrols of 3 to 5 men. Move slowly, quietly, using the forest canopy and fog as cover. Probe American lines. Cut communication wires. Eliminate sentries. Create chaos. American commanders were losing men every single night. Not to massive frontal assaults, but to these ghost-like raiders who struck from the darkness and disappeared before anyone could return fire. The psychological impact was crushing. Soldiers stopped sleeping. Every sound became a potential threat. Entire platoons would burn through their ammunition, firing blindly into the forest at shadows and wind. Standard doctrine said, illuminate the battlefield. Use flares, but flares had a fatal flaw. The moment one went up, it destroyed your natural night vision. The bright magnesium light would cause your pupils to contract instantly, and the German infiltrators knew this. They'd wait for the flare, freeze in place, and the moment it burned out, they'd rush forward while American soldiers were temporarily blinded, their eyes struggling to readjust to the darkness. Some units tried setting up searchlights, but searchlights are static, predictable. The Germans would simply avoid illuminated areas or, worse, use the light to identify American positions and call in artillery. The U.S. military did have night vision technology in late 1944. The M1 and M3 carbines could be fitted with the T120 sniper scope, an active infrared device that used an infrared light source and a special viewing scope. But these systems were rare, bulky, unreliable in cold weather, and required heavy battery packs. Only a handful of specialized units had access to them, and none were deployed to the Ardennes in those crucial first days. So the American defenders were essentially fighting blind. They had superior firepower, better artillery support, and more men. But none of that mattered if you couldn't see your enemy. This was the situation when one sniper, assigned to a company holding a position along a creek valley in the northern Ardennes, decided to stop fighting the darkness and start using it. The sniper's background was unremarkable. He'd grown up hunting in rural America, like thousands of other soldiers. Deer, mostly, some rabbit. He was a good shot, good enough to be selected for sniper training, but not exceptional. His service record up until December 1944 showed competence, not brilliance. What set him apart wasn't his marksmanship. It was his patience and his willingness to experiment. During the third night of the German offensive, while his unit was under constant pressure from infiltrators, he started thinking about a technique his grandfather had taught him for hunting at dawn and dusk. His grandfather had been a nighttime poacher during the Depression, and he developed methods for seeing game in low light that went beyond simply waiting for your eyes to adjust. The human eye has two types of photoreceptor cells: cones and rods. Cones handle color vision and work best in bright light. Rods handle low-light vision and detect motion. But here's the crucial detail that most people don't know. Rods are almost completely insensitive to red light. This creates an interesting biological loophole. If you expose your eyes to red light, your rod cells don't react. They stay in their dark-adapted state, fully sensitive, ready to detect even the faintest movement in darkness. But if you expose your eyes to white light, even briefly, both your rods and cones react, and your night vision is destroyed for 20 to 30 minutes. The U.S. Navy had known about this since the early 1940s. Submarine crews used red lighting in their operations. Rooms so sailors could read charts and instruments without losing their ability to see through periscopes at night. Some night bomber crews used red cockpit lighting for the same reason. But this knowledge hadn't filtered down to infantry doctrine. Ground forces still used white flashlights, white flares, and white lanterns, all of which destroyed night vision. The sniper realized that if he could keep his rod cells fully dark adapted throughout the night, he'd have a significant advantage over German infiltrators who were relying on brief periods of darkness between American flare bursts. His first experiment was simple. He took a red lens filter from a damaged flashlight, one that had been in the bottom of a supply crate. These red filters were standard issue, meant to be used on flashlights for reading maps at night without giving away positions. But no one thought to use them for anything else. He fashioned a makeshift eye patch from the red filter and a piece of cloth. The idea was straightforward. During the day, and any time he needed to use white light, he'd wear the patch over his dominant eye. This would keep that eye in complete darkness, allowing the rods to stay fully adapted. His non-dominant eye would handle normal vision. Then, when darkness fell, he'd remove the patch. His dominant eye, the one he used for shooting, would already be fully dark adapted. He wouldn't need to wait 20 or 30 minutes for his night vision to develop. It would be instant. The technique wasn't new. Pirates in the Age of Sail may have used eye patches for the same reason, keeping one eye dark adapted for rapid transitions between bright sunlight on deck and darkness below. Some historians debate this, but the biological principle is sound. What was new was applying it to combat sniping in World War II. The sniper spent an entire day preparing. He wore his red filtered patch over his right eye from dawn until dusk, ignoring the questions and jokes from other soldiers. They called him Pirate, Cyclops, half-blind. He didn't care. He also made other preparations based on his grandfather's poaching techniques. He identified a position with clear sight lines across a valley where German infiltrators had been spotted 3 nights in a row. He set up not in an obvious overwatch position, but in a depression behind a fallen tree. Somewhere he could remain motionless for hours. He memorized the landscape in daylight. Every tree, every rock, every slight variation in terrain. This was critical. At night you can't see details. You can only detect changes in what you've memorized. As darkness fell, he removed the patch. The effect was immediate and disorienting. His right eye, the shooting eye, could suddenly perceive details that his left eye, still adjusting from daylight, couldn't see. It created a strange double vision. One eye seeing darkness, the other seeing shapes and movements. But within minutes, as his left eye began to adapt as well, the full effect became clear. He could see. Not perfectly, not like daylight, but he could distinguish the silhouettes of trees against the slightly lighter sky. He could detect movement at distances that would have been impossible an hour earlier. Around 2100 hours, he spotted them. 3 figures, moving slowly along the creek bed, exactly where German infiltrators had appeared the previous nights. They were cautious, professional, using terrain for concealment. In normal circumstances, in normal darkness, they would have been invisible, but the sniper could see them. The contrast between their moving shapes and the static landscape was clear to his dark-adapted eyes. He tracked them through his scope, waiting for one to pause in a position where he had a clear shot. The scope was the tricky part. Looking through a magnified optic at night is usually useless. The small amount of available light gets spread over a larger area, making everything dimmer. But because his eye was fully dark-adapted, maximally sensitive to even trace amounts of light, the scope became marginally useful again, not for precise shot placement, but for confirming targets and judging distance. At approximately 175 yards, the lead figure stopped, kneeling behind a bush to observe American positions. The sniper controlled his breathing, centered the crosshairs on the figure's mass, and squeezed the trigger. The M1903 Springfield's report shattered the night silence. The figure collapsed. The other 2 German soldiers immediately dove for cover, but they made a critical mistake. They moved. And movement was exactly what the sniper's dark-adapted eyes were optimized to detect. He tracked the second figure as it scrambled toward a tree. Another shot. Another hit. The third soldier went completely still, trying to become invisible in the darkness. He stayed frozen for nearly 10 minutes, hoping the American sniper had lost track of him in the chaos. But the sniper hadn't lost track. He'd watched exactly where the man had gone to ground, and his dark-adapted eyes could still perceive the subtle outline of the prone figure. One more shot. 3 German infiltrators eliminated in less than 15 minutes. The sniper remained in position until dawn, his red filtered patch back over his right eye, preserving his night vision advantage for the following night. When he finally returned to his unit's position, he didn't report what he'd done. He simply told his spotter that he'd engaged and eliminated 3 enemy combatants during the night. His spotter thought he was exaggerating, maybe hallucinating from exhaustion. No one could make accurate shots at night in the Ardennes. It was impossible. But the next morning, a patrol found 3 dead German soldiers in exactly the positions the sniper had described, each killed with a single rifle shot, all at ranges beyond 150 yards. In pitch darkness, the impossible had happened. Within 48 hours, word of the night kills spread through the regiment. At first, most soldiers didn't believe it. Night sniping in the Ardennes? With iron sights and a basic scope? Impossible. But then it happened again. And again. The sniper continued his technique. Every day, the red-filtered patch over his shooting eye. Every night, removing it and taking up his hunting position. And every night, German infiltrators who entered his sector of the forest didn't come back. 4 more eliminated on the second night. 2 on the third. 3 on the fourth. Other snipers in the unit started asking questions. How was he doing it? What was the secret? He showed them the red filter patch technique. Most were skeptical, but a few tried it themselves. Within a week, 5 snipers in the regiment were using variations of the dark adaptation method. The results were undeniable. German infiltration in their sector dropped by nearly 70% within 10 days. Soldiers started sleeping again. The constant psychological pressure of nighttime raids evaporated. But this success created a problem. The technique violated several points of military doctrine and equipment regulations. Modifying issued equipment, even in minor ways, was technically prohibited without authorization. The red filter patches, while made from issued materials, represented an unauthorized field modification. More seriously, the technique went against established night combat doctrine. Official U.S. Army training manuals stated that illumination was the correct response to night infiltration. Flares, searchlights, coordinated lighting from multiple positions. The idea of individual snipers operating in complete darkness, using biological adaptation instead of technology, wasn't part of any approved tactical manual. When a battalion commander visited the regiment and heard about the night sniping success, he ordered an immediate investigation. He wanted to know exactly what these snipers were doing and whether it complied with regulations. The answer was no, it didn't. The battalion commander's concern wasn't entirely bureaucratic. There were legitimate questions about whether the technique was safe and reliable. What if a sniper using the red patch method misidentified a target? What if they engaged friendly patrols operating in the same area? The potential for friendly fire incidents was real. There was also a concern about psychological effects. Extended use of monocular vision, with one eye dark adapted and one eye light adapted, could cause eye strain, headaches, and disorientation. No medical officer had approved this technique. What if snipers were damaging their vision? The battalion commander issued a direct order. Cease all unauthorized night vision adaptation techniques immediately. Use standard doctrine. Use flares for illumination. Coordinate with artillery for mortar illumination rounds. But stop the red patch technique. The snipers were furious. They'd found something that worked, something that saved American lives and killed German infiltrators. And now they were being told to stop because it wasn't in the manual? The original sniper, the one who'd developed the technique, faced a choice: obey the order and go back to being blind at night, or continue using a method that he knew was effective and risk court-martial for disobeying a direct order. He chose to continue, but he did it carefully. During official briefings and inspections, no red patch. Full compliance with regulations. But at night, in his fighting position, the patch went back on during the day and came off after dark. Other snipers in the unit followed his lead. It became an open secret. The officers knew it was happening, but as long as the results continued, as long as German infiltration stayed low and American casualties kept dropping, they looked the other way. This uneasy compromise lasted for about 3 weeks. Then something happened that forced everyone, from battalion commanders to division headquarters, to pay attention. December 23, 1944. The Germans launched a major night assault on a different sector of the Ardennes line, one where the dark adaptation technique wasn't being used. The attack came at 0200 hours, in complete darkness, with fog reducing visibility to near zero. German stormtroopers infiltrated American positions, cut through wire obstacles, and were inside the defensive perimeter before anyone realized what was happening. The American response followed standard doctrine. Flares went up. Searchlights came on. Illumination rounds from mortars burst overhead. For brief moments, the battlefield was lit up like daylight. Soldiers could see the German attackers, could return fire, could organize a defense. But between each flare burst, there were periods of darkness. And during those periods, every American soldier was temporarily blinded. Their pupils contracted from the bright light, their rods overwhelmed. The Germans, who had been operating in darkness for hours with fully adapted night vision, used these blind spots to advance, to flank positions, to get dangerously close before the next flare went up. The battle lasted 4 hours. When dawn finally came, the American position had held, but barely. Casualties were heavy. 37 killed, over 90 wounded. An entire platoon had been overrun in the darkness before reinforcements could respond. The after-action report was damning. The reliance on illumination had created a predictable pattern. The Germans had timed their movements to exploit the gaps between flare bursts. American soldiers, temporarily night-blind after each illumination, had fired wildly, wasting ammunition and hitting very little. Meanwhile, 15 miles to the north, in the sector where the dark adaptation snipers were operating, German probing attacks that same night had been decisively repulsed with minimal American casualties. The difference was stark, and division headquarters wanted to know why. When investigators interviewed the units, the dark adaptation technique finally came to official attention at the highest levels, not as a violation of regulations, but as a potential tactical innovation that might save lives across the entire front. A medical officer was brought in to evaluate the technique. His assessment was cautiously positive. Yes, there were potential issues with eye strain and disorientation, but the physiological principle was sound, and submariners had been using red light adaptation for years without reported problems. As long as snipers rotated on and off duty, allowing their eyes to rest normally during downtime, the risk was minimal. A tactical evaluation followed. Infantry officers tested the technique themselves, wearing red patches during the day and then moving through darkened training areas at night. The improvement in night vision was measurable and significant, not miraculous, not like modern night vision goggles, but enough to detect movement and identify targets at tactically useful ranges. The conclusion was clear. The technique worked, and it should be adopted more widely. But there was a problem. The original battalion commander who'd banned the technique had based his order on legitimate concerns and existing doctrine. If higher headquarters now officially approved the technique, it would implicitly criticize his decision and undermine his authority. Military politics at work, even in the middle of a battle. The solution was bureaucratic and face-saving. The dark adaptation technique would be approved, but reframed as a new tactical innovation being introduced by division headquarters, not as a grassroots technique that had been developed by enlisted snipers in violation of orders. Official training materials would be created, medical guidelines would be established, and the technique would be rolled out systematically across multiple units. The original sniper and his fellow innovators wouldn't be punished for violating regulations, but they also wouldn't receive official recognition for developing the technique. Their contribution would be absorbed into the official narrative, credited to division staff officers rather than to the soldiers who'd actually figured it out in the field. It was a compromise that satisfied no one but kept the command structure intact. By early January 1945, as the Battle of the Bulge reached its conclusion, over 200 snipers across 3 divisions in the Ardennes were using variations of the dark adaptation technique. The implementation varied by unit. Some snipers used red lens patches, others improvised red-tinted goggles. A few creative soldiers used red cellophane from ration packaging, wrapped around their eyes like makeshift blindfolds during the day. The basic principle remained the same. Keep one or both eyes in complete darkness during daylight and any time white light was present, so that rod cells stayed fully dark adapted and ready for night operations. The tactical results were measurable. After-action reports from January 1945 show a significant decrease in successful German infiltration in sectors where dark-adapted snipers were deployed. American casualties from nighttime raids dropped by approximately 40% in those areas. Perhaps more importantly, the psychological balance shifted. German soldiers, who had owned the night during the first days of the offensive, now had to worry about invisible American marksmen who could see and shoot in total darkness. The fear factor reversed. German after-action reports from the period, captured later, mention American night hunters and describe certain areas of forest as too dangerous for patrol operations after dark. The Totenzonen, death zones, that German soldiers had started whispering about were real, but the technique had limitations that became apparent as it spread. It worked best for stationary snipers who could remain in position for extended periods, observing specific approaches and kill zones. It was less effective for mobile patrols or rapid response situations where soldiers needed to transition quickly between different lighting conditions. The eye strain issue was real. Snipers using the technique for multiple consecutive nights reported headaches, difficulty focusing, and general eye fatigue. Medical officers established rotation schedules, limiting snipers to 3 consecutive nights of dark adaptation before requiring a rest period. There were also friendly fire concerns. Increased shooting at night even by skilled marksmen, inevitably led to incidents where American patrols were mistaken for enemy infiltrators. Coordination and communication became critical. Units using dark-adapted snipers had to implement strict protocols for identifying friendly forces in darkness, and fundamentally, the technique was a stopgap measure, a clever biological hack to compensate for technological limitations. It was useful in the specific conditions of the Ardennes in winter 1944-45, but it wasn't a long-term solution to night combat. By late 1945, the U.S. military was already investing heavily in electronic night vision technology. The infrared systems that had been rare and experimental in 1944 were being refined and mass-produced. Within a few years, snipers would have access to true night vision scopes that didn't require biological adaptation or red filter patches. The dark adaptation technique would fade from military doctrine, replaced by technology that provided superior capabilities without the limitations and risks of the biological approach. But for a few crucial weeks in the frozen Ardennes, when the outcome of the Battle of the Bulge hung in the balance, one sniper's simple hack had turned darkness from an enemy advantage into an American weapon. The identity of the original sniper who developed the dark adaptation technique remains uncertain. No official Army records credit a specific individual with the innovation. It's possible he was killed later in the war. It's possible he survived and returned home, never receiving recognition for what he'd accomplished. What we know is that his idea, forbidden at first and then reluctantly adopted, saved American lives. How many? Impossible to calculate precisely. But in a battle where every advantage mattered, where the difference between success and failure was measured in small tactical edges, the ability to see and fight effectively at night was significant. The story raises questions about military innovation, about how new ideas develop and spread, and about the tension between official doctrine and field adaptation. The best tactical innovations in war often come from soldiers on the ground, people facing immediate problems who develop immediate solutions. But military hierarchies are designed for standardization and control, which sometimes conflicts with rapid grassroots innovation. The dark adaptation technique succeeded not because it was officially sanctioned, but because it worked. And eventually, pragmatism overcame bureaucracy. Modern military snipers have technology that would seem like science fiction to a soldier in 1944. Thermal imaging, digital night vision, laser rangefinders, computerized ballistics calculators. They don't need red filter patches to see at night. But the fundamental principle that one resourceful sniper proved in the Ardennes remains true. In war, the side that can see when others are blind has an advantage that often decides who lives and who doesn't. The Ardennes Forest is peaceful now. The foxholes have filled in, the destroyed villages rebuilt. Veterans' gatherings grow smaller each year as the men who fought there pass away. But somewhere in military archives, buried in after-action reports and tactical assessments from December 1944 and January 1945, are references to an unauthorized technique that turned sections of dark forest into zones where German infiltrators learned to fear the night. The forbidden hack that, for a brief moment in history, made one sniper's eyes into a weapon that technology couldn't match.